Alcohol is damaging your organs more than you even realize. See, we think that a drink here and there isn't that big of a deal, but think again, because today we are revealing the 5 organs that alcohol damages the most, and the facts will shock you. Your liver is not the only organ taking a hit. There are so many others at major risk. If you are worried about your drinking, or you're worried about the damage it's doing to your body, you need to watch this video. This could be the wake-up call that you seriously need. So if you're ready for the truth, let's dive into it. So first, a quick introduction. My name is Leon Sylvester. I'm the founder of SoberClear.com, and we use a totally new method to help business owners and professionals get control of their drinking. And the method works quickly in as little as 48 hours. See, I drank alcohol for close to a decade. I've tried stopping hundreds of times using AA, willpower, churches, whatever, but for the past 6 years, I've not touched a drop of alcohol, and more importantly, I have no desire to drink. So if you want information on how I actually work with people directly, then just go over to SoberClear.com, or if you click the link in the description of this video, you can actually book a call and we can jump on a phone call together. I'll outline the program and the method in more detail, and we can see if it could be a good match for you. But my method doesn't revolve around calling you an alcoholic or going to the past with a therapist. There's no medication. It's completely different to everything else out there. So if you want details, either go to SoberClear.com or book a call by clicking a link in the description. So first, let's look at the brain. So alcohol damages your brain in more ways than we can possibly cover in a short video like this. So we're going to dive into the most important areas first, starting with the easiest to understand, which is that over the years, heavy alcohol consumption literally eats away at your brain and shrinks it. See, alcohol is a neurotoxin, and with heavy consumption, it can kill off vast numbers of brain cells. By the time that they die, brains of heavy drinkers can be up to an ounce lighter on average compared to non-drinkers. Now, whilst the shrinkage affects the entire brain, certain parts are especially susceptible, like for example, the frontal cortex, which underpins some of the cognitive traits that we most value in humans. Things like goal-directed behaviors, good judgment, and problem solving. In short, our ability to think ahead, plan, and dynamically adjust our course of action depending on the feedback that we receive. See, when you consider the damage to the frontal cortex from all the years of drinking, it's not really a mystery why so many drinkers find it difficult to stop. Their ability to objectively take stock of their condition, evaluate alternative courses of action, and plan accordingly becomes heavily compromised. They are essentially drinking themselves into a hole, as it were, one from which becomes even harder to climb out of. But it's not just frontal lobe faculties. More or less all cognitive abilities of drinkers are compromised. Memory, attention, concentration, language, social and motor skills, coordination, you name it. More or less any neuropsychological or cognitive evaluation chronic drinkers are given, they will generally perform worse than non-drinkers. Now, aside from shrinking the brain, alcohol also wreaks havoc on the molecules that our brain cells use to communicate, the so-called neurotransmitters. See, alcohol is actually in a complete league of its own when it comes to how many different neurotransmitter systems it interferes with. It artificially boosts the activity of some and suppresses that of others. Very few other drugs, be they legal or street drugs, even come close in terms of how widespread their effects are on our neurotransmitters. A nice example is alcohol's impact on 2 related neurotransmitters called GABA and glutamate. GABA molecules are generally used to send calming signals between brain cells. They suppress brain activity. Glutamate, on the other hand, is an excitatory neurotransmitter. It increases brain activity. Alcohol artificially suppresses the activity of glutamate and boosts that of GABA. In sufficient doses, the result is a general state of calmness and sedation, at least temporarily. The problems really start to show when you try to quit. After years of training, the drinker's brain has come to expect the steady influx of alcohol. As a result, it decreases its natural baseline level GABA activity and increases that of glutamate. This kind of sort of works at a steep price, of course, until the day the drinker quits for good. At that point, there is no more booze in the system to cover up those neural changes, meaning that your brain produces the exact opposite effect of alcohol intoxication. Instead of sedation and calm, you get sleeplessness, irritability, mood swings, and anxiety. In really heavy drinkers, the glutamate dysregulation can be so severe that it can lead to seizures, delirium, and death. The good news is that soon after you stop drinking alcohol, the brain does start to recover. Only a month after your last drink, it will have greatly increased in volume, and it will continue to rebound over the next few years and months ahead, until it gradually approaches the volume of a non-drinker. Alongside the volume rebound, many of your previously compromised cognitive functions will also start to improve. But there is a catch. The recovery will always be conditional on you not drinking again. Even a relatively brief relapse will wipe out all your volume gains, shrinking your brain back to its previous shriveled self. Scientists still don't understand how the brain remains so vulnerable to alcohol even after many years have passed from the last drink. Now, let's look at the heart. So, despite what your favorite newspaper or evening news might be advertising, red wine is not good for your heart. See, red wine is toxic to your heart like all other booze. In the medical literature, alcohol is referred to as cardiotoxic. In other words, something with a toxic effect on the heart. This toxicity is generally separated into acute and chronic, which is another way of saying short and long term. One of the acute effects that are easiest to measure is increased blood pressure, or hypertension. 3 to 4 drinks a day raise the risk of hypertension by 70% and 7 drinks by 150%. And though it has no symptoms, hypertension is not to be taken lightly. On the contrary, it is the leading risk factor for increased mortality or your probability of dying. As a matter of fact, the single best thing that you can do to live longer is lower your blood pressure. No other health intervention can increase your life expectancy as much as this. And if you're not measuring your blood pressure regularly, I would advise you doing so now, especially if you're still drinking. Now, the second common acute cardiotoxic effect of alcohol is cardiac arrhythmia, an irregular heartbeat. In the late 1970s, an astute doctor coined the term holiday heart to describe this. It's a sudden onset irregular heartbeat in otherwise healthy people, which was the result of binge drinking. And this typically happened around the Christmas and New Year period, hence holiday heart. Now, assuming the person stopped drinking, the arrhythmia would usually disappear just as quickly. If they kept on drinking, however, the arrhythmia would become chronic, with potentially deadly results. Over time, drinking leads to structural changes in the heart muscle itself, so-called alcoholic cardiomyopathy. Its muscles weaken and the heart literally stretches out of shape, leaving it unable to effectively pump blood through the body. This happens because alcohol interferes with several cellular functions of the heart tissues, including the regulation of calcium levels and various proteins. Symptoms of cardiomyopathy include weakness, shortness of breath, palpitation, swelling of the extremities, chest pain, and eventually death from heart failure or cardiac arrest. On average, it takes about 15 years of heavy drinking to develop this condition, though this can sometimes be as little as 5. Depending on how advanced it is, complete abstinence may or may not lead to a partial recovery. So much for being good for our heart. What nonsense. Now, thirdly, let's look at the liver. So, the liver is one of the most remarkable of our organs, and at the same time, the least appreciated. We understand that the role of the heart is to pump blood. The lungs are there to deliver oxygen to our bloodstream, and so on. But what does your liver do? Ask a man on the street, and he probably doesn't have a clue. Well, it turns out that the liver is the most versatile of our solid organs, with over 500 different functions. Some of these include metabolizing and storing nutrients, regulating blood glucose and cholesterol, as well as synthesizing proteins. But perhaps its most well-known function is to detoxify our body from foreign substances that should not be there, like alcohol. It's the liver's job to break them down and prepare them for expulsion. The problem is that when ethanol is transported to the liver for breakdown, it's first metabolized into an even more toxic substance, acetaldehyde. This is a highly reactive molecule, meaning that it likes to interact with everything that it finds inside the liver. Cell membranes, proteins, DNA, and so on. See, acetaldehyde is the reason that the liver is the organ to suffer the most from drinking, and it's why liver disease is a leading cause of death amongst drinkers. The first stage of alcohol-related liver disease is so-called fatty liver. This is when the liver becomes enlarged due to an accumulation of fat. Fatty liver is nearly universal among drinkers. Scientists believe that it develops in part due to alcohol interfering with several genes that regulate the production and breakdown of fat. The good news is that fatty liver is generally reversible if you stop drinking. The next stage of liver disease, however, alcoholic hepatitis, is not always reversible. Here the liver is not only fat but also becomes inflamed and scarred, largely from the action of acetaldehyde. The giveaway for hepatitis is jaundice, the characteristic yellowing of the skin and whites of the eyes. Other symptoms include loss of appetite, weakness, nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain. Though symptoms can be severe, hepatitis can still be reversed if the person stops drinking at least partially. The final stage is cirrhosis, where most of the healthy liver is replaced by scar tissue. This is irreversible end-stage liver disease that comes about after many years of heavy drinking, typically 10 to 20 years. Symptoms are the same as hepatitis, also including weight loss, swelling in the ankles and feet, as well as muscular atrophy. An especially dangerous complication of alcoholic cirrhosis is the buildup of fluids in the belly, so-called ascites. The appearance of ascites signals the transition to very advanced cirrhosis, and complications from them are often fatal. Life at that point is more or less unlivable. The person has to go to hospital regularly to have the ascites mechanically drained, all while dealing with all of the other complications of cirrhosis. There is no effective treatment for cirrhosis. Even with complete abstinence, life expectancy can be very short, especially with ascites present. Now fourth, let's look at how it damages the pancreas. See, the pancreas has two major functions. It produces enzymes that regulate your digestion, as well as hormones that regulate your levels of blood sugar. And though it doesn't directly metabolize alcohol like the liver, it's one of the organs most heavily affected by chronic drinking. See, the damage happens via various biochemical routes, several of which involve acetaldehyde. The hallmark disease is pancreatitis, an inflammation of the pancreas. About 70% of pancreatitis cases can be attributed to alcohol, and the remaining to other causes. See, alcoholic pancreatitis typically starts as an acute single episode or series of episodes. Most often this is in males in their 30s. The telltale sign is severe abdominal pain, and I do mean severe. Lab tests and scans will then go on to show increased levels of pancreatic enzymes in the blood, as well as visible damage to the pancreas in imaging. If the person stops drinking, there is a possibility that the condition will resolve. Now, this was famously the case with Friends star Matthew Perry, who, to the best of our knowledge, had a one-off bout with the disease in the year 2000s before going sober shortly after. If the person continues drinking, however, the pancreatitis can progress to a chronic, irreversible form. Here, just like with the liver, irreversible scar tissue begins to form. This gradually replaces the healthy tissue to the point that the pancreas becomes non-functional. According to one estimate, you typically need a minimum of 6 to 12 years of heavy drinking exceeding 80 grams of ethanol daily, which is around 6 drinks a day. Patients with chronic pancreatitis have a much reduced life expectancy. Now that alcohol is toxic to the pancreas is not in dispute. The mystery for scientists is why only a minority of heavy drinkers, maybe around 10%, will go on to develop full-blown pancreatitis. Another mystery is that the autopsies of many deceased people who suffered with AUD show pancreas damage consistent with pancreatitis, even if the person never complained of any symptoms whilst alive. Researchers now believe that there exist certain cofactors that increase the drinker's susceptibility to this disease. And some of these include smoking, obesity, as well as unidentified genetic factors. Smoking, in particular, is so damaging that it can cause pancreatitis on its own even in non-drinkers. And another thing to consider is that for people who are genetically prone to pancreatitis, even relatively minor amounts of alcohol can be enough to trigger the disease. And given our current state of technology, we have no way of identifying these people until after they have become sick. Depending on how advanced the disease is, stopping drinking may or may not help reverse it or even alleviate the symptoms. So the takeaway from all of this is A, if you're drinking, you're pretty much playing with fire. B, once you get pancreatitis, especially the chronic version, all bets are off. There is no guarantee that stopping drinking will heal your pancreas or even relieve the symptoms, which would leave you with a painful and dramatically shortened life. And finally, let's look at the reproductive organs. And I have saved one of the least recognized but potentially most devastating effects of alcohol for last. See, the damage that this poison inflicts on the fertility of both men and women. Now, a recent review in the famous scientific journal Nature pulled data from 19 independent studies. Combined, these involved a whopping 98,000 women. These studies had all examined the effects of drinking on a woman's probability of achieving pregnancy during a menstrual cycle. Compared to non-drinkers, light drinkers showed an 11% decrease in getting pregnant. For heavy drinkers, the decline was 23%. This decrease in fertility takes place through various mechanisms, including hormonal imbalances and irregular menstrual cycles. In some women, periods can cease altogether. The so-called ovarian reserve, which refers to the quantity and quality of a woman's remaining eggs, is also compromised. Studies that look at the outcomes for couples who attend IVF clinics find that women who consume more than 4 drinks a week have a 16% lower chance of producing a live birth compared to non-drinkers. And things are equally bad, if not worse, for men. Chronic drinking lowers the levels of several hormones necessary for the proper development of sperm cells. These include testosterone, the luteinizing hormone, and the follicle-stimulating hormone. Alcohol also directly attacks the testicles, with autopsy studies finding a statistically significant weight difference between the testicles of heavy drinkers and non-drinkers. So booze can end up shrinking your testicles in a similar manner to your brain. The effects of alcohol on sperm are dose and time dependent. The longer and harder you drink, the lower your parameters slide. First and foremost is a reduction in total semen volume. Then there are parameters which describe both the quantity of your sperm cells as well as their quality. In other words, the percentage that are properly formed. Common sperm cell defects caused by alcohol included breakage of the head, swelling of the midsection, and curling of the tail. An equally important parameter, and one that is often the first to be affected, is motility. In other words, the percentage of sperm cells that actively move forward. And if you want to understand the science, why and how alcohol actually affects the body and attacks it, then click the video on the screen right now.